Song of Songs is using a unique Hebrew grammatical structure where they sort of use repetition as an intensifier. So like, in the Bible you sometimes hear the King of Kings or the Lord of Lords, meaning the greatest king or the greatest Lord. Song of Songs means the greatest song. And the greatest song is love. That is the theme and the focus of this book. And so, in honor of the Song of Songs, and the theme that it has about it, of love and romance, I would like to share with you the 10 best pickup lines from the Song of Songs. If you just needed a way to sort of meet someone of the opposite gender, this is just some hints that may be useful to you. So, and some of these are slightly taken out of context, shifted around a little bit, but bear with me. I think God will be amused, and I hope you will be as well. For a good time, follow the tracks of the sheep and graze your young goats by the tents of the shepherds. If you're looking to meet someone for love, that is the location in the Song of Songs. Number 2, flash those pearly whites, baby, because your teeth are like a flock of sheep coming up from the washing. Each has its twin, and not one is alone. Don't you feel your heart being melted even as we speak? Look away, for your eyes overcome me. Your hair falls in waves like a flock of goats frisking down the slopes of Gilead. The kisses of your lips are honey, my love. Every syllable you speak a delicacy to savor. Your clothes smell like the wild outdoors, the ozone scent of high mountains. What's that you're wearing? Ozone? Your waist is a mound of wheat encircled by lilies. Do you think this is about the guy or the girl? I'm not too sure. There may be 60 wives, all queens, and 80 concubines and unmarried virgins available to me, but I would still choose you. I'm not cheating on you, baby. I keep coming back. It's like showing you how much more I love you than everybody else. Your navel is a rounded goblet that never lacks blended wine. So I guess you better not get it pierced or it might leak. I'm not sure. Your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon. And that zit is like the banner that flies above it. Your stature is like that of the palm, and your breasts are like clusters of fruit. Moving along, quickly. Your rounded thighs are like jewels, the work of a skilled craftsman. Girl, do you do Stairmaster or what? 10 lines from the Song of Songs that may or may not be useful to you in your quest for romance here on campus. Now, what a lot of you are thinking right now is, how absolutely bizarre. I thought this was a love poem. Your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon. These are freaky compliments. The ancients were nutcases, and we would never do anything like that today. Truly? Have you been listening? You may have heard this little ditty before. It's an obscure little tune, but perhaps it will ring a memory somewhere within you. Come on. Get some movement going on, guys. The Tower of Lebanon is weird to us, but Brick House is not. I mean, at least a tower is like sleek and slender and elegant. A brick house is like squat and square and angular. I mean, another one. Just to give you a sense, this is something that we do a lot more in our culture than we realize. It stands out to us when we see it in another culture, but in ours it happens all the time. This is a little bit more of a contemporary illustration. I see recognition on a few faces. Like he did not. Do with all that junk inside the trunk? I'ma get you drunk, get you drunk off my hump. This is straight out of the Song of Songs, baby. This is it. We use these absolutely nutty metaphors to describe the beauty of people of the other gender, to describe physical parts of other people, to describe the way that we feel about other people. And what we don't understand when we read a poem like this in another language is, when they hear, your nose is like the Tower of Lebanon, they don't think about that literally any more than we think about, he just compared my hiney to a vehicle with an opening hatch. We just don't have those thoughts that occur to us. And in the same way, these poems, when taken in their context, are very beautiful and very moving when you dig into what's going on within the culture. And the clue to remember the main thing to keep in mind as we look throughout this poem is people are fundamentally the same. From culture to culture, from age to age. The basic same impulses and instincts run through us all. And so put yourself into their shoes and say, if I was saying something like that to someone of the opposite gender, what would I most likely be trying to get across? You don't need a whole lot of scholarship. You just need to have experienced adolescence. And you will be right at least 85% of the time. And so with that sort of as one of our guiding principles, I want to lead you through some key verses here through the Song of Songs and build to a point tonight that I think will be relevant to where most of us are at. So the song at the beginning is very, very, let me just put it this way, it doesn't hide its theme. The very first lines of the song go like this. Let him kiss me with the kisses of his mouth, for your love is more delightful than wine. Pleasing is the fragrance of your perfumes. Your name is like perfume poured out. No wonder the maidens love you. Take me away with you, let us hurry. Let the king bring me into his chambers. To play Texas Hold'em? Not likely. This is a poem that from the very get-go, it's not like, hi, here's my name, hey, here's the story of how we met. This is a love song, just like the sort of love songs that we find on the radio today. It gets to the point very quickly. This is a song of desire. And in this case, it's got a female lead vocalist. I find this interesting for a couple of reasons. First, the Bible at least does not seem to share the perception that a lot of people have that women have no sex drive, or that women have no sense of romantic desire in them, or that men should always be the initiators. She's pretty forward right here. She's obviously feeling rather frisky, and she's expressing intense passion for this man. Another thing that occurs to me as I read through this poem is that this is much like in our culture, a song that does not necessarily reflect actual events. People sing about love a lot more than they experience love. People use words to express desires more than they do to recount ballads of what has actually happened to them. This is a type of genre that is more figurative than factual. Now, it is rooted upon deep facts about human nature, but this is likely not the actual story of two people who fell in love. It may be, but it is in that case probably even been exaggerated and built upon in order to drive home a deeper point about the meaning of love. Just like Celine Dion, My Heart Will Go On. Well, yeah, she wasn't playing on the Titanic, you know. It's a way of evoking emotions within us. That's important to keep in our mind as we read through this psalm, because unless you realize there's a lot of stuff happening here that's not really happening, you get really confused about, wow, for people who are like, you know, seem committed to loving God, they sure have a whole lot of sex without being married. That's the point of the song. They're expressing their desires, their hopes, their dreams, things that they sort of want to do, and then they keep bringing it back around to reality. We're going to see that theme again and again as we look at some key verses in the song. But what we, like when she's saying, take me away to your chamber right now, she's not actually saying that to him. She's saying that in her dreams. It's a fantasy, a daydream that she's having. And that occurs again and again in this song. So, I'll give you an example. Song of Solomon, chapter 2, verses 4. She's having another daydream, another fantastic episode. He's taken me to the banquet hall, and his banner over me is love. Has anybody ever sung a song with that as the lyrics, by the way? His banner over me is love. Okay, I'm going to ruin those songs for you ever tonight, and I'm sorry. But you just need to understand, those are bad songs. They have wrong theology. Strengthen me with raisins, refresh me with apples, for I am faint with love. His left arm is under my head, his right arm embraces me. Pause for a minute. So, his left arm is under my head, his right arm embraces me. No? Oh! That only makes sense in a context like this. Especially when you realize that the Hebrew word for embraces would in almost any other document but this one be translated fondles, caresses. It's a very intimate word. These people are not ballroom dancing. Daughters of Jerusalem, I charge you by the gazelles and by the does of the field. Do not arouse or awaken love until it so desires. So what's happening here? Okay, she's sharing this story about what she's seeing in her mind, what she's sort of hoping will happen. He takes me to the banqueting table. Now, what is this banquet hall? It's a drinking house. It's a bar. He takes me to the bar, and his banner over me is love. His banner, what's that all about? Scholars who have looked at this, and I've researched several, and these are very conservative scholars who really deeply believe the Bible to be God's word, who are very committed to the integrity and the authority of Scripture, who say, what it means is he took me to the drinking house, and his intention towards me was love, seduction. He wanted to sweep me off my feet. And she says, oh, I'm filled with love. Refresh me with raisins and apples, which is sort of a, for people in that culture, was a scene very much like, what was her name, Kirsten Dunst or whatever, in The Bed of Roses, in that movie with Kevin Spacey, whose name completely escapes me right now. Thank you, American Beauty. A very vivid image here, very erotic images. And then she's talking about him taking her literally. And it's like, whoa, 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 whoa. She snaps stuff out of the daydream. I can't, whoa. I can't let my mind run this direction. I should not stir up or awaken love until the right time comes, and the right time has not come. I like him, I maybe even love him. Maybe we're even romantically involved, but we're not married. She snaps herself back. So sorry if I ruined that song for you, but he brought me to his banqueting table, his bedroom, he was love. He wanted to get me drunk. We go on. This song cuts both ways. Like I've had the female lead so far, again and again. The male also has strong desire for the woman in this song. He says how beautiful you are and how pleasing in Song of Solomon chapter 7, starting in verse 6. O love with your delights. Your stature is like that of the palm, and your breasts are like clusters of fruit. I said, I will climb the palm tree. I will take hold of its fruit. Very subtle imagery here. May your breast be like the clusters of the vine, the fragrance of your breath like apples, and your mouth like the best wine. She's like, woo! So she replies, may the wine go straight to my lover, flowing gently over lips and teeth. I belong to my lover, and his desire is for me. Come, my lover, let us go to the countryside, let us spend the night in the villages. Let's get away from our parents, let's get away from our friends, let's sneak off where we'll have some privacy. Let us go early to the vineyards to see if the vines have budded, if their blossoms have opened, and if the pomegranates are in bloom. There, I will give you my love. These people are people just like you, just like me, just like everyone else you know, who after encountering this funny little event called pubescence, have hormones coursing through their body. And at times are driven almost insane with physical desire for sex, for physical stimulation. Now, I want again to emphasize to you, these people are not actually doing this in the psalm. And the key to understanding this is to go to the very end. And let me just fast forward there for a second. You skip ahead to Song of Solomon, chapter 8, verses 8 to 12. And this is the very close of the book, or 8 to 14, actually. This is the way the Song of Solomon ends. Again, sort of a chorus has come on. Her brothers are not too sure how they feel about their sister, coming into her own as an adult. And started talking among themselves, like, we have a young sister. Her breasts are not yet grown. In other words, they're still thinking of her as a very little girl. They're feeling that whole brother protective instinct. You guys have older brothers, any of you? You know what's going on here? Okay, this is the conversation. What should we do for our sister on the day that she's spoken for? Yo, man, don't be asking my sister out now. If she's a wall, we will build towers of silver on her. If she's a door, we will enclose her with panels of cedar. What's the imagery here? If she is loose with her favors, we're going to sequester her and keep her away from trouble. If she shows a tendency to be promiscuous, we're going to just keep her, away from men if she's boy crazy. But if she proves to be a woman of great virtue, we're going to heap honors and decorations and praise upon her. And so she replies, oh, I'm a wall. I'm a very chaste person. Yes, I have all these desires, of course, but I behave with propriety. I am the master of my desires, not their slave. And she says, for the record, my breasts are like towers. Thus I have become, in his eyes, like one bringing contentment. Solomon had a vineyard in Baal-Hamon. He let out his vineyard to tenants. Each was to bring for its fruit 1,000 shekels of silver. But my own vineyard is mine to give. The 1,000 shekels are for you, O Solomon. The 200 are for those who tend its fruit. What's she getting at here? She's like, look, this is a very, for example, she's speaking of her love as her physical virginity, as a vineyard, a garden, a very sacred, secret, beautiful place. It's a very common metaphor in the Song of Songs. And she's saying, look, let's take a real vineyard here. Solomon's got one. It's very expensive. It's a high-priced property. It's the Trump condominium wine tasting center of its day. That's a fabulous place. But you know what's worth even more than that? Than Trump Towers? My virtue. It's not for sale. I'm not going to sacrifice it. I'm not going to compromise it. I'm not going to give it away for less than what it's worth. And what it's worth is a lifetime commitment. And so then she says, you who dwell in the gardens with friends in attendance, let me hear your voice. In other words, can I hear an amen, sister? And then, come away, my lover, and be like a gazelle or a young stag on the spice-laden mountains. In other words, continue this journey of love with me. But she ends the book with a strong affirmation of her commitment to purity, physical purity, to sexual chastity, to abstinence, until she comes to the place where it is the right time for love to be stirred up or awakened. Now, a couple of thoughts in general about this before I really hit what I want to talk about tonight. First, a lot of what I'm saying will not make sense to you apart from a fundamental Christian perspective on life, a Christian worldview. Now, I realize everyone here may not share that, but you need to know that's where I'm coming from, and that's where we're collectively coming from. The Christian perspective on sex is simply this. Sex is a magnificent, beautiful thing. It was God's idea. He invented it. He's still proud of it to this day. He looks very favorably upon it. And he puts it in a very special context. He says sex is such a powerful force in human life. It's got such power to sweep you off your feet and to change the way you think about yourself and about others, and to trigger deeply moving emotions, that it needs to be reserved for a lifetime commitment, where you can explore these in full without fear. And so sex is for marriage in biblical perspective. From very consistently in the Bible, this is the message that we are given. There's no way to avoid it unless you willfully choose not to accept it. And the reason that Christians place such an emphasis upon chastity, upon refraining from sexual indulgence until marriage, is because we believe, and research bears us out on this, that purity now paves the way to intimacy later. Purity now paves the way to intimacy later. Quick question. Have you ever heard someone, or perhaps given this advice yourself, some people are thinking about maybe we should get engaged or get married. Well, maybe you guys should move in together first and see how it works out. Maybe you should give that a try before you make this big, irrevocable commitment. Well, sociologists have done a lot of research on this. Who do you think is more likely to have a successful marriage, defined as one in which you do not end in divorce? The couple who refrains until they're married, or the couple that lives together and tries it out first? The couple who refrains until marriage. In fact, I remember vividly in my undergraduate classes, I was taking a sociology class, and the sociologist said, you know, this is really a very counterintuitive result. And I was thinking, how is it counterintuitive? What these people are doing is they're entering this relationship. The ones who choose to live together and give it a trial run, like sort of a test marriage, what they're doing is they're entering with this notion that I can leave whenever I want. That's why I'm entering in this relationship. I want to enter with the mentality I can back out whenever I want. And that mentality stays, even once they put on rings and exchange vows at the altar. Whereas the couple that has said, no, I'm going to wait. They're going into it with the mentality, this is an irrevocable commitment. This is something I'm doing with my life. And the happiest and the best marriages come from that result. And, as I mentioned in a message earlier, this quarter, last quarter, I guess, sociologists also tell us, psychologists tell us, that the best sex, defined as the most frequent female orgasmic sex, is had by monogamous married couples, contrary to what you hear in so much of society. And I put the research out there before. If you need references on that, you can email me and I'll get it to you later by email. So that's the context. Purity now paves the way to intimacy later. By behaving well now, by short-term self-control, we experience long-term gain, just as in every other area of life that matters. Are you a student athlete? You know well what I speak of. You train now so you can win later. Are you a student? You know what I speak of. You study now so you can pass the test later, so you can write the essay later, so you can do the program well later. The same thing is true of your sexual life. If you are disciplined now, if you refrain now, you will rejoice in it later. So that's the biblical context. The goal is chastity. The same goal that these people have in the psalm. But here's the problem. Sexual desire is very strong. And that's one of the things this book is in the Bible to remind us of. God is not ignorant of that fact. He designed this desire. He knows how strong it is and how powerful of a force it can be. And he knows that while the commandment to chastity is not optional, the living out of it can be quite difficult. And so what I want to do with you is share some very practical pointers on how you can remain pure in a very polluted society. How can you remain chaste in a sexually charged culture? How you can have purity now that paves way for intimacy later. There are really three pillars, three steps upon which this tripod of purity rests. The first is commitment. This notion that I'm going to resolve in my heart that yes, I will remain from this point on sexually abstinent until marriage. If you are still a virgin, that is great. Keep that up. If you've fallen short, start now. This is the thing about God's grace. He can meet you where you're at and take you where you need to be. God can restore your emotional innocence, if not the physical. And He could do that should He choose, but that's kind of rare. He can do amazing things in your heart. And He can prepare you to be married to the person He wants to be married, should that be His desire for you. And if God can give you the strength to endure a lifetime of celibacy, which will be hard. But if He calls you to that, He will gift you for that. So you have to have that commitment. Because if you don't have the commitment, in the heat of the moment, rationalizations will creep in. You got to have that as your pillar. I will not until I'm married. And then you better believe I will. That's number one. The second pillar is modesty. This notion that I will not deliberately seek to arouse members of the opposite sex, or on this campus, of the same sex. I will seek to be, I will make it, because of that whole principle of treat other people the way you want to be treated, I want to remain pure. I will make it as easy as possible for other people to remain pure. I wish they would do this for me, I will do it for them. Now, this applies to both guys and girls. Often modesty is preached just to the women. It's like, hello, women have eyes too, and guys have bodies. And while in general women may not be as visually driven as men, guys, show some respect. Be careful, and just a side note, I'm not really into rules. I don't lay down a lot, but biker shorts, just say no. And that's not even just an issue of sexual attraction. That's just like, oh, don't do that. Don't do that. Gals, be alert to the way you dress. Now, I'm not saying don't dress nice. There's a difference between being modest and being frumpy. Like, I'm not in favor of like, dress that leaves you incapable of determining the gender of the person. That's not the goal. You can look good, but you all know, everyone in this room knows that we can dress to arouse, and that sometimes we do. Don't do that. The third pillar, and this is the one that I'm going to spend the most time talking about, is be wise. Don't kid yourself. Just don't kid yourself. I would like, Leilani, could you pass one of these out to everybody? And Rick, could you do it on the other side as well? So you've got two handouts in front of you. The one is just each week in this series on the Song of Songs. I should say, it's loosely inspired by themes from the Song of Songs. I give you an article by this guy named Jay Bush-Shefsky, who's a professor of philosophy at University of Texas in Austin. I find him very helpful. It's not directly related to my talk, but it's just useful information. This is actually something that ties into what I'm talking about tonight. This is a question that I am asked more than virtually any other as a minister by young dating couples. And usually it is in these exact words. How far is too far? What can I get away with without receiving a smackdown from on high? What can I do physically with my partner of choice without God being angry at me? What can I do without, losing my technical virginity or whatever? A couple of thoughts. First, I'm not going to give you a detailed list of rules, a checklist. First, how weird would that be? B, I don't find that those things are generally helpful. The problem with rules is rules breed loopholes. Rules breed exceptions. And rules do not tend to stand the test of time. The church has learned this again and again throughout history. How many of you guys were raised in a church that had rules that made a lot of sense to your grandparents and your parents, but made no sense to you because the culture had changed? That is true in almost every area. I will not give you rules. I will give you principles that you need to internalize and whose application will be obvious 99% of the time. First principle that you need to bear in mind, and remember, this is assuming your goal is purity. If it's not, hey, this is just like advice on how to go far. But if your goal is to remain pure, just bear these things in mind. The further that you go, the further that you want to go. This is an accelerating slope. It is not as though you can take the edge off of your sexual desire by having oral sex. No. That's going to make you want to go all the way. It is not as though you can let off some steam by having a major makeout session. No. That's called foreplay. And it is before the play. Realize that the further you go, the further you're going to want to go. And also, the further you go, the faster you go. That once you burst past a barrier, you're not going to go back. And that the next step is far closer. Like how many of you guys know this in your relationships? There is a significant gap between I like you to I have kissed you. That's like a huge gap. The gap from I have kissed you to I have kissed you passionately, much shorter. From I've done that to next step on the line, much, much shorter. The further you go, the faster you go. And where you draw your lines determines a couple of things. It determines what you will be tempted to do next. I can 100% predict what you will be tempted to do next. What is the line you have drawn? You will be tempted to do this. So what do you want to be tempted by? How strong do you want that temptation to be? And how serious do you want the consequences of giving into that temptation to be? And then ask yourself this question. In my life, do I ever give in to temptation? If the answer is yes, then you might want to be a bit prudent in where you draw that line. Realizing odds are, at some point, I will go at least a little bit across it. And then this is one I find extremely practical. Just bear in mind that the sin potential of an area is directly proportional to its nerve endings per square inch. And so, if you're in any doubt as to whether or not an activity is going to be hazardous, potentially challenging for you, just, do I have a lot of nerve endings there? Probably. And let me get very, very specific here, because study after study has shown that most young people today, defined as people under the age of, say, 28, 25, certainly including you guys, and most Christian young people do not consider oral sex to be sex, anal sex to be sex, various forms of mutual masturbation to be sex. Look, I don't know who you're kidding. First, what does oral sex have in common with sex? The word sex! There's a reason it bears that title. And the other thing is it leads to orgasm. How is that not a clue? If behavior leads to orgasm, it is by definition sexual activity. That's what sex is about. Orgasm. It's about the thing that leads to the promulgation of genes and to the associated activities. So what does the Bible say about that? The Bible is very clear. The Bible on purpose uses broad terms to talk about sexual sin. It doesn't use a lot of technical language because rules breed loopholes. So the biblical word for sexual sin used almost exclusively throughout the New Testament is porneia, the word from which we get pornography. It is a word that just basically means anything that's going to wind up with someone orgasming. That's porneia. That is sexual sin. In other translations, it says sexual immorality. Older translations say fornication. What's fornication? That stuff. So if you're serious about obeying God and honoring God with your life, then obey those guidelines. And if you are serious about remaining pure until marriage, having purity now so that you may experience intimacy later, these are the guidelines that God is laying down for you. Now, there's a lot more that I could say, but we're running out of time tonight. And so what I want to do is simply pray for you.